Senator from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I've been here on this is my third occasion on a speech that I wish that I didn't have to give on the floor of the U.S. Senate. But I promise that I'm going to give a speech on this subject every week that the Senate's open for as long as I'm a U.S. Senator. And there's a man in a Turkish prison who I don't believe should be. This man's name is Andrew Brunson. Pastor Brunson, a Presbyterian minister who lived in Black Mountain, North Carolina, has been in Turkey for about the last 20 years with his wife, raised his family there. Presbyterian minister who first did just ministry work, didn't have a church to actually open up to the community, but just did ministry work, preaching the word and delivering the word to people in Turkey who wanted to hear it. A small church. It's only about 50 full-time members. It's a church that's just outside of Izmir. It's actually in Izmir proper, which is one of the larger cities in Turkey. But this man has been in prison now, as of today, for 586 days. He was actually brought to prison without charges under the emergency order since the coup in 2016. He was put in prison on October 4th, 2016. He was held in a prison for almost 17 months that was designed for 8 prisoners that had 21 in it. None of the other ones American, none of the other ones English-speaking, many of them charged on either ISIS or terrorist charges or plotting the coup attempt. He was in that prison for almost 17 months. He lost 50 pounds. His health is diminished. His mental state, as anyone would expect, is also diminished. But he's a strong man and a strong man of faith that hopefully can continue to have the strength to go through this horrible process. Now, about 2 months ago, we've been handling this. We have what we call casework. And if somebody in North Carolina needs help, whatever that may be, we encourage them to call our offices. We open up a case. We do any number of things for veterans, for military families, seniors, anybody. If you need help getting through the federal government, you call our office. So we opened up a case on Pastor Brunson about a year ago. And we've been trying to work through diplomatic channels to get him released. And then about 4 months ago, we heard that the indictment was going to be served on Pastor Brunson. And I got word back from some of the family members and people in the faith-based community that they were concerned that the American people were going to read the indictment and really judge him guilty and turn their backs on him and have him languish in prison for what is essentially a life sentence. He's 50 years old, and the charges would be up to 35 years. It was so important for me to have him know that we cared about him that I traveled to Turkey and made a request, got a visa to go to Turkey, made a request to go to that Turkish prison and look Pastor Brunson eye to eye and tell him we're not going to forget about him. And we're going to do everything we can to work for his release and the release of a number of other people who I genuinely believe in Turkey are subject to religious persecution. So I met with him in the prison for about an hour and a half. And it turns out that we just found out that his first court date was going to be about 3 weeks later. So I decided to go back to Turkey 3 weeks later and to be in that courtroom to hear the testimony for myself, to hear the 62-page indictment play out. And I was in that courtroom from about 9 o'clock in the morning on Monday morning until about 10 o'clock that night. And what I saw there, if you don't know what a kangaroo court is, and you can't read it on this slide, just Google it real quick, because what I saw was a kangaroo court. First off, you should think about the setting. It's unlike any setting you could ever imagine in the United States. They don't have trial juries, so you have a 3-judge panel up there. And the prosecutor is really elevated to almost being another judge. The prosecutor's up at the dais. Now, the defense attorney, we're in a room that's about half the size of this room, well, maybe about 2/3 the size. It's a big room. The defense attorney is off to the side about another 30 or 40 feet, and the defendant's right in front of these judge panel being looked down upon. He had to testify for 6 hours on his own behalf. They don't have a choice in Turkey. So then they list out the charges. And why do I say it's a kangaroo court? Let me just give you a summary. I'm not going to cover all of them because my time is limited today. But let me give you a summary of some of the charges. There were, in the time that I was there were about a half dozen secret witnesses. These are people that the defendant doesn't get to face their accuser. In Turkey, these secret witnesses can basically say what they want to say. Well, one secret witness that the essence of his testimony was that they knew that Pastor Brunson was involved in either plotting the coup or working with the PKK, which is a terrorist organization represented by the Kurdish. It's a terrorist organization fundamentally made up of Kurds, was because they witnessed a light on in this church for 4 hours. Now, first off, I know in the U.S. system, you're probably not going to get prosecuted for 35 years by having a light on for 4 hours. At least I'd hope not. But what makes this even more challenging, this is the church. This church only seats about 120 people. It's got 2 very small upstairs rooms. I know because I've been there. We took these pictures when I visited Turkey after the visit to the prison. This is the room that is alleged to have had a light on for 4 hours. One problem: no window. No way to possibly see this room. And in fact, the windows in the downstairs are closed with storm windows. I guess they have, I'm trying to think of the name, the shutters, wooden shutter. There's no way you could even see in. But this witness had what they consider to be compelling testimony that a light was on, and for that reason, they had to be involved in the terrorist plot or the coup. Another of the charges alleged by the prosecution is that all of the churches in America are connected and that they actually work in unison in other countries to disrupt the governments of other countries. That a Christian church, you know, they may bring the word to people in other countries, but they're really there to kind of organize as an intelligence gathering and destabilizing force on behalf of the American government for disrupting other sovereign nations. Literally, this is how they're thinking, and this is what they're using to prosecute them. Kangaroo court. Now, I maintain that what we've got is a hostage situation here. We have President Erdogan saying if we give him a pastor that they're trying to work to extradite here, on the one hand they say you got to work through the system and we've got to let justice be served. On the other hand, the president has said, well, if you give us somebody that we're trying to extradite from the United States, then we'll give you Pastor Brunson. This is a hostage situation. This is religious persecution, and I'll finish with this. Turkey is a NATO ally. They're an important NATO ally. They've been in NATO since 1952. They're in a very dangerous part of the world. They have a lot of challenges that they have to deal with. The Syrian conflict, their own internal economic challenges, a number of challenges. I understand that President Erdogan's job is difficult. I'd like to make it easier as a co-lead of the Senate NATO Observer Group to work how we can actually strengthen our partnership, make them safer and secure, their homeland and their threat from foreign adversaries. But today, I've got a NATO ally that's behaving like no NATO ally has ever had in the history of the alliance. These are the sorts of things that we're supposed to be doing as members of the NATO alliance, not imprisoning illegally for 586 days a Presbyterian minister. So, Mr. President, we'll be doing the NDA markup next week. I'm working with other members. That's the National Defense Authorization Act. I'm going to have to put forth provisions in the NDA. That is the last thing that I would like to do. I'd like to put provisions forth that strengthens the alliance with NATO, that sends the very clear signal that we want to help them secure their homeland, that sends a very clear signal that we want to work together with the fight in Syria. But today I can't have that as a priority. Today my #1 priority is releasing Pastor Brunson. I hope that everybody understands that this is something that everybody, whether you're from North Carolina or North Dakota or any state in this nation, we should all stand as a nation saying, this is not how you treat an American citizen, certainly not a NATO ally. And I look forward to hopefully never doing this speech again. I hope that by next week, Pastor Brunson is freed, and that we've sent the very clear message to all the other people in Turkey who are in prison because of their faith that this is unacceptable behavior. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.